There are lots of options that you can adjust in the setup section, but I'll go through each control and give you a quick overview of what each does. So first you can select the guitar pickup to use, and next we have the ability to multi-track your guitar, anything from, the single track to double tracking, triple tracking, quadruple tracking. And when you select one of those, you can also change the humanization, that is the timing differences that randomly occur between each guitar track. Next, we have different styles of picking. And this is pretty subtle, but you'll hear it mostly in the pick noises that occur. Next, we have pick modeling. When you turn that on, it'll model the pick position. If you pick close to the bridge, you get a more plucky, nasally tone. Or if you move that closer to the neck, then it tends to sound more warm and full, and even sometimes a little bit hollow sounding. So that's that. Pick noise amount allows you to adjust not only the volume of the pick noise samples, but also their length. If you're finding that the pick noises make the guitar a little bit laggy, then you can always decrease this value. Next, you can adjust the volume of the release samples right there. And then we have the fretting position. Now set at 0, the guitar will automatically play close to the headstock of the guitar. And as you increase that, it'll play at 12th position right there. It'll move closer and play closer to the body of the guitar. Now, if you're playing lead guitar, usually you'd be playing higher up on the neck. And then if you're playing chordal stuff, lots of open, big open chords, then you'd probably be playing, closer to the headstock of the guitar. Next, we have a dynamic morphing option, which what that does is instead of the velocity layers switching between each other, they'll actually crossfade between each other to kind of give you a morphing effect to smooth out the differences between dynamics. Next, you can adjust the kind of the response of your keyboard and the response of the instrument by emphasizing the loud velocity layers or the soft ones, or you can impose limitations on the velocity layers right here by setting a low limit to the velocity or a high limit. We also have a MIDI guitar mode for MIDI guitar users, and what that does is it maps each string to different MIDI channels rather than using the automatic string selection. If you're going to use the MIDI guitar mode, just make sure that your MIDI channel for the input is set to Omni, so that way it receives signal from all of the necessary MIDI channels. Next, you can adjust the position of the capo on the guitar. And what that does really, because guitarists use it as a transposition aid, but what it really does is it allows you to access voicings that use a lot of open strings in certain keys that you ordinarily would not be able to get. So it's really something that will affect the voicings available to you. And then, of course, it does limit the range. If you move the capo position upward, you're going to lose notes down at the bottom of the guitar. So next we have a bunch of different alternate tunings included, and those will also affect the range of the guitar available. And then you can adjust the legato range, either up or down. And what that does is it sets the interval necessary to trigger legato, as opposed to both notes getting played at the same time. So if you want to disable legato completely, then just move both of those to, all the way left to their disabled setting. Let's see, next we have the bend mode, and that allows you to adjust how notes get affected by the pitch wheel on your keyboard. So with all set, that means that all the notes will get affected by the pitch wheel. You can also set it so that only the lowest note that you play gets affected, or the highest note, first or last. And once you select one of those options, you also get an option to either include or exclude that note. So if you include the lowest note, that means only the lowest note will get affected by the pitch wheel. Whereas if you set it to exclude, that means the lowest note will get excluded and all the other notes, so every other higher note, will be affected by the pitch bend. It's probably best if you just experiment with the different bend modes and to get a better idea of what each mode does. Next, we have separate controls for the pitch bend range, either upward or downward. So upward is usually good to leave at like a major second, which is kind of the standard for pitch wheels. For the pitch bend range down, you can always set that a lot higher to emulate a whammy bar. You know, that way you can do really extreme bends downward. Next, we have a resonance amount, which adjusts the volume of the string resonance samples. And then you can select which MIDI controller number that the vibrato is controlled with. So by default, that's MIDI controller number 1, which is the mod wheel. But you can set that to a lot of others as well as aftertouch, which is kind of handy if your MIDI keyboard supports aftertouch. We also included a couple different vibrato curves that are kind of specific towards different styles of music. And you can adjust the width and speed of the vibrato as well. Next, we have auto fret noise, which what happens is if you play notes outside of where the fretting position is, and then you release all the notes, about a second later, you'll hear the noise of the guitarist shifting the fretting position back to the default fretting position. If you want to disable that, you can just set the volume all the way down to 0, or you can tweak the overall volume of that effect using that control as well. Finally, the last control is a dynamic memory option. And by default, that's disabled, which means that all the samples are going to get loaded into memory. With dynamic memory enabled, it will only load the samples that you need into memory. So what it does is it looks at all of the articulations that you actually have mapped and only loads those samples into memory. So it can save you a lot of memory, but the reason that it's disabled by default is if you're skipping through the different factory presets to audition them, sometimes you don't want it to be constantly loading and unloading samples from memory because that can naturally cause audio artifacts, you know, clicks and pops. And if you're in a live situation where you need to change presets, you really don't want artifacts like that to happen. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful, and thank you for watching.